Welcome back to Top 5. Amelia Elizabeth Hobley, born in 1837 in the small village of Pile Marsh, located just east of Bristol, England, stands as one of the most infamous figures in the annals of criminal history. She is commonly referred to as the Ogress of Reading, a title that encapsulates the horror of her actions as a serial killer responsible for the deaths of numerous infants over a 30-year period. Her life story is a grim tapestry woven with threads of personal tragedy, psychological turmoil, and societal neglect, reflecting the complexities of the Victorian era, a time marked by social upheaval and the plight of vulnerable women and children. Amelia was born into a family that was no stranger to hardship. She was the youngest of 5 children, with 3 brothers, Thomas, James, and William, and a sister named Anne. Her father, Samuel Hobley, was a master shoemaker, while her mother, Sarah Hobley, née Weymouth, suffered from severe mental illness due to typhus. This illness cast a long shadow over Amelia's childhood, forcing her to witness her mother's violent fits and ultimately taking on the role of caregiver. The burden of such responsibilities at a young age left an indelible mark on Amelia's psyche, instilling in her a deep sense of fear and helplessness that would later manifest in her adult life. The early death of her mother in 1848 marked a pivotal moment in Amelia's life. Without the nurturing presence of her mother, she was left to navigate the world of adulthood with little guidance. The deaths of her siblings compounded her feelings of isolation. Her elder sister Sarah had died at the age of 6 in 1841, and another younger sibling, also named Sarah died shortly after birth in 1845. The pervasive atmosphere of grief within the Hobley household contributed to Amelia's emotional instability and sense of loss, shaping her worldview in profound ways. Following her mother's death, Amelia was placed in the care of an aunt in Bristol for a time before she embarked on an apprenticeship as a corset maker. This trade offered her a glimpse of independence, but it also underscored her precarious financial situation. In 1859, the death of her father further exacerbated her struggles, leaving her without familial support. Her eldest brother, Thomas, inherited the family shoe business, but Amelia felt increasingly estranged from her siblings, particularly her brother James, with whom she permanently severed ties in 1861. This estrangement would leave her isolated and vulnerable, pushing her towards desperate measures in the years to come. In 1861, at the age of 24, Amelia married George Thomas, a man significantly older than herself. Their marriage was steeped in deception, as both parties lied about their ages on the marriage certificate to obscure the significant age difference. George reduced his age by 11 years, while Amelia added 6 years to her own. This early instance of manipulation foreshadowed the patterns of deceit that would characterize Amelia's later life. George Thomas was 59 at the time of their marriage, and while the union initially provided her with a sense of stability, it was short-lived. George died in 1869, leaving Amelia widowed and once again facing financial difficulties. With few skills and limited prospects, Amelia sought to secure her future by turning to baby farming, a practice in which individuals took in unwanted infants from unmarried mothers in exchange for a fee. This practice was particularly prevalent during the Victorian era, as societal stigma surrounding illegitimacy left many women vulnerable and desperate. The Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834 had stripped fathers of their financial obligations to these women, leaving them with few options for support. Amelia learned to exploit this vulnerability, presenting herself as a respectable caregiver while systematically murdering the infants entrusted to her care. In her early days as a baby farmer, Amelia initially cared for the children legitimately, but her economic desperation soon led her down a dark path. She began to neglect the infants, allowing them to die from malnutrition and illness. This neglect led to her conviction for child neglect, resulting in a 6-month sentence of hard labor. The leniency of this sentence shocked many, especially given the gravity of her actions. Instead of deterring her, this experience emboldened Amelia to refine her methods and avoid detection in the future. Upon her release from prison, she resumed baby farming with renewed vigor, adopting increasingly ruthless tactics. Over the years, Amelia's methods evolved into a chilling pattern of murder. She would advertise her services in newspapers, promising a loving home for the unwanted infants and assuring their mothers that their children would be safe in her care. However, once she received payment, often a substantial fee, her demeanor would shift dramatically. Her financial motivations drove her to strangle the infants shortly after taking them in, often using white edging tape, which became a signature method of her killings. The lack of adequate oversight and the societal stigma surrounding illegitimacy meant that many mothers were too ashamed to inquire about the welfare of their children, allowing Amelia to operate with relative impunity for years. Amelia Dyer's chilling ascent into infamy began in earnest during the 1870s. By this time, she had developed a reputation as a baby farmer and was adept at manipulating the desperate circumstances of vulnerable mothers. She would often assure them of her respectable status, claiming to be a married woman with a loving home. Many mothers, facing societal ostracism and financial hardship, placed their trust in her, believing they were securing a better future for their children. However, the reality was far more sinister. Once Amelia received payment for her services, she would often decide to eliminate the child altogether, pocketing the money without the burden of care. Despite the growing number of child deaths associated with Amelia, she managed to evade law enforcement for a significant period. Her activities drew the attention of authorities, and in 1879, she was arrested when a doctor became suspicious of the unusually high number of child deaths he had been called upon to certify. Instead of facing serious charges, she was sentenced to 6 months of hard labor, a punishment that many viewed as shockingly lenient, especially given the gravity of her actions. This leniency only served to embolden her, and upon her release, she returned to her murderous ways, seemingly undeterred by the consequences. Throughout her life, Amelia exhibited signs of severe mental instability, which led to multiple commitments to mental asylums due to her erratic behavior and suicidal tendencies. Her time in these institutions varied in severity. Many observers speculated that her breakdowns coincided with periods of heightened scrutiny from the authorities. Dyer was adept at manipulating her surroundings, often feigning illness to escape the consequences of her actions. During this time, she began to abuse alcohol and opiate-based products, which further deteriorated her mental health and contributed to a cycle of crime and evasion. As the 1890s approached, Amelia had relocated several times, using a series of aliases to evade capture. In 1893, she was discharged from her final committal at the Somerset and Bath Lunatic Asylum. By 1896, she had settled in Caversham, Berkshire, with her daughter, Mary Ann, and son-in-law, Arthur Palmer. It was during this period that she would commit her most notorious crimes. In January 1896, Evelina Marmon, a 25-year-old barmaid from Cheltenham, found herself in a desperate situation after giving birth to an illegitimate daughter named Doris. Facing financial difficulties and societal pressure, Evelina sought offers of adoption and placed an advertisement in the Bristol Times and Mirror, seeking a respectable woman to care for her child. Amelia responded to this advertisement under the alias Mrs. Harding, assuring Evelina that she and her husband would provide a loving home for Doris. Desperate to secure a better future for her child, Evelina reluctantly agreed to pay Amelia a one-time fee of £10. Upon meeting, Evelina was struck by Amelia's advanced age and stocky appearance, but ultimately decided to trust her. This decision would prove fatal for Doris. Shortly after taking custody of the infant, Amelia murdered her, using the same white edging tape that had become her signature method of killing. Amelia's depravity did not end with Doris. Just a day after murdering her, she took in another child, a 13-month-old boy named Harry Simmons. With no spare tape available, she removed the tape from Doris's corpse to strangle Harry, demonstrating a complete lack of remorse or humanity. After committing these horrific acts, Amelia disposed of both bodies in the River Thames, believing that she had successfully evaded the consequences of her actions. However, her downfall was imminent. On March 30, 1896, a bargeman discovered a package in the Thames that contained the body of a baby girl, later identified as Helena Fry. This discovery set off a chain of events that would ultimately lead to Amelia's arrest. Detective Constable Anderson and his team began piecing together evidence linking Amelia to the murders. They placed her home under surveillance and decided to use a decoy to lure her into revealing more about her operations. On April 3, 1896, police raided Amelia's home, where they were met with a horrific scene. Although no human remains were found at the time, the evidence collected, white edging tape, adoption letters, and pawn tickets, painted a damning picture of her activities. Dyer was arrested the following day and charged with murder. The investigation revealed that, over the years, she might have been responsible for the deaths of hundreds of infants, with estimates ranging from 200 to 400 victims. As the trial commenced, Amelia's case gripped the public's attention. It became one of the most sensational trials of the Victorian era. Amelia pleaded guilty to the murder of Doris Marmon but attempted to use insanity as her defense, arguing that her mental health issues had driven her to commit such horrific acts. However, the prosecution successfully countered that her episodes of her mental instability were merely a ruse designed to deflect scrutiny from her crimes. The prosecution highlighted the calculated nature of her actions, emphasizing how she had methodically planned and executed the murders of the infants in her care. They presented evidence that demonstrated Amelia's clear understanding of her actions, effectively dismantling her claims of insanity. On May 22, 1896, the jury took a mere 4.5 minutes to reach a verdict of guilty. The courtroom was filled with spectators, many of whom were horrified by the details of the case but equally fascinated by the sheer audacity of Dyer's crimes. Her trial became a spectacle, reflecting the public's morbid curiosity about the darker aspects of human nature. In the weeks leading up to her execution, Amelia filled several notebooks with confessions, reflections, and justifications for her actions. She wrote extensively about her life, her experiences, and her feelings of despair, despite the overwhelming evidence against her. As the date of her execution approached, Amelia expressed a profound sense of resignation. She had been given a death sentence, and she seemed to understand the gravity of her situation. On June 10, 1896, Amelia Dyer was hanged at Newgate Prison. Her last moments were marked by a chilling indifference. When asked if she had any final words, she simply replied, "I have nothing to say." At precisely 9 a.m., she was dropped through the trapdoor, marking the end of a life that had spiraled into darkness and despair. The execution of Amelia Dyer sent shockwaves through society, igniting discussions about the treatment of children, the plight of single mothers, and the moral responsibilities of society toward its vulnerable members. Her actions prompted significant changes in child protection laws in England, highlighting the urgent need for reform in how society dealt with the issues of adoption and care for illegitimate children. The case also played a crucial role in raising public awareness about the dangers of baby farming, a practice that had previously gone largely unchecked. In the aftermath of Amelia Dyer's crimes, there was a growing recognition of the need to protect children from neglect and abuse. This awareness ultimately contributed to the establishment of the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, NSPCC, in 1884, an organization aimed at advocating for children's rights and welfare. The NSPCC sought to address the systemic issues that allowed individuals like Dyer to exploit vulnerable mothers and their children, working to ensure that such atrocities would not be repeated. Amelia Dyer's life story serves as a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity and the societal failures that can enable such horrors. Her actions reflect the complexities of human nature, illustrating how desperation, mental illness, and societal neglect can intertwine to produce catastrophic outcomes. The historical context of her life, the stigma surrounding illegitimacy, the lack of support for unwed mothers, and the societal indifference to the plight of vulnerable children, paints a broader picture of the challenges faced by women during the Victorian era. Furthermore, Amelia's case underscores the importance of vigilance in protecting the vulnerable members of society. It serves as a cautionary tale about the potential consequences of ignoring the needs of those who are most at risk. The systemic issues that allowed Dyer to operate for so long without detection reveal significant shortcomings in societal structures, particularly in terms of child welfare and protection. The legacy of her crimes continues to resonate today, reminding us of our collective responsibility to safeguard the well-being of children and to advocate for those who cannot advocate for themselves. In the years following her execution, Amelia Dyer's name became synonymous with horror and tragedy. Her crimes have been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and academic studies, as historians and criminologists seek to understand the motivations behind her actions and the societal factors that contributed to her rise as a serial killer. The fascination with her life and crimes reflects a broader interest in the psychological complexities of criminal behavior, as well as the societal implications of such atrocities. Today, Amelia Dyer is often studied in the context of criminal psychology, as researchers seek to explore the factors that may have contributed to her violent behavior. Discussions surrounding her mental health, the impact of her traumatic childhood, and the societal pressures she faced provide valuable insights into the interplay between individual psychology and broader social issues. Her case illustrates the importance of understanding the root causes of criminal behavior, particularly in cases involving serial killers, where the motivations can be deeply intertwined with personal history and societal context. In conclusion, the life and crimes of Amelia Dyer serve as a haunting reminder of the darkest corners of human nature and the societal failures that can enable such horrors. Her actions prompted significant changes in child protection laws and raised awareness about the plight of vulnerable mothers and their children. The legacy of Amelia Dyer continues to resonate today, underscoring the need for vigilance, compassion, and systemic reform to protect the most vulnerable members of society from exploitation and harm. Her story is one of tragedy, horror, and ultimately, a call to action, a reminder that we must remain aware of the vulnerabilities that exist within our communities and advocate for those who cannot speak for themselves.